Okay, and I'll just go to the full. Okay, and I'm just going to okay, I think I did stop my video so that it doesn't get in the way. Okay, so today we're looking at unpacking the new math curriculum in grade 5. Specifically, we're looking at fractions, and that's why I put that there today. I'll go to the next one. We'll do right away. We'll get into the land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional treaty lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So I first want to say welcome. Happy belated Thanksgiving. I hope that you all had a great weekend, a nice rest, maybe got together with friends, family, and enjoyed this wonderful weather. If you're from Edmonton, we had beautiful weather this weekend. I'm sure I think the whole province did actually. So I hope that you're well rested, and I want to thank you for coming back. If you've been before, coming on a Tuesday, which is the first day right after your beautiful long weekend. And I hope that there are some new learnings for you. It is very jam-packed again because it is fractions. I did grade 4 fractions last week, and I will tell you that I am going to send this time, you will get the grade 5 fractions, but you are also going to get the slides for the grade 4 fractions. There are some slides that are very similar because of the prior learnings, but because fractions are, so much of it is new to grade 4, 5, and 6, I felt that I needed to separate the grades at this point, but you will get the new learnings for grade 5, but as well the slides for grade 4, so that you can look at if you need some ideas or suggestions for some prior learnings. And if you want the recording from grade 4, you can either email me and let me know, and I can get that sent to you, or if you call the admin office, they will send it to you as well, even though you haven't registered. So yes, so we'll go with that. Now, I do want to start with this little clip. Some of you may have seen it already, but it is well worth seeing again. I'm just hoping that the video works, because this laptop is not the best in some situations like that. So if you don't see it when I click on the link, I may have to go back and reshare my screen. So, and this is actually, as much as I've read, this is actually true. So this little blurb about A&W, the owner in the 1980s wanted to kind of, surpass or outdo McDonald's Quarter Pounder, and launched the Third is the Word campaign to promote A&W's new third pound burgers. So I'm not going to read the rest of this because you'll get that from the video. So you'll see, as to my knowledge, this really did happen, and you'll see the fallout from it. So I'm hoping that you can see this video. Could someone let me know if you are, before I do this.
A&W launched an advertising campaign to promote a new third pound.
Whoops. Can somebody let me know? Can you see this video? Any one of you, if you can just let me know. Oh, let's see. Oh, great. Thanks, Annette. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so then I'll just play this little video for you, and you can hear it.
Burger.
I'm going to start again.
1980s, A&W launched an advertising campaign to promote a new third-pound burger. It was bigger and beefier than the competition's puny quarter-pound option, and the price was the same. So how come nobody bought it? Turns out, Americans are just terrible at math, like really bad. Everybody thought that 1/3 was smaller than 1/4 because, 4 is bigger than 3. The whole thing went down in history as a huge marketing fail. And we've spent the last 40 years crunching the numbers. Our best mathematicians working day in and day out, trying to crack the uncrackable code, solving the unsolvable equation to claw our way back from this embarrassing episode. And we've done it. Introducing the A&W 3 Nights Burger. It's bigger. Genius.
Okay, I'll just let that go and hopefully that will go. Oh, we'll have to go back to see if this comes up again. You know what I'll have to do is I'll have to just reshare. I'll stop sharing and then I'll reshare again. And we'll go back to this one there. Okay. This is where we were. So just a little comedic relief about looking at fractions. And although you got from that very quickly that, of course, the 3 Nights burger is the same as the 1/3 burger, we're looking at equivalent fractions. One of the misconceptions that you're going to see in the grade 4 slides, and I might have even put it in the grade 5, is that notion of not looking at understanding the denominator in this case and the size of the equal pieces. And so just because the 9 is bigger than the 4, then they did the 3 Nights. Now, it does actually give you a link to where you can, the locations that sell the 3 Nights burgers, but I think it's just an ad to say these are all the A&Ws that you can find everywhere in the States and in Canada as well. So and something you can actually show your students if you want to. So we'll just go from there. Now, I always start with a warm-up. We won't do this one today because I chose to show you the video instead. But I wanted to share this with you. I always do, like, no matter what grade it is, even junior highs, when it comes to something seasonal, I always like to try to find some math, or I even make changes to things that can be done. In one grade, I can change it to a higher grade or a different grade. So this is, I wanted to share this because this has just come out. I just got the email from Joe Bowler, who is a well-known math educator in the United States, has a wonderful website, which is going to be on your slides. I think I always put her on my slides, but she has come out with the spooky math challenges for kids. They're actually Halloween puzzles, she calls them, and it's what you see here. So this is a little bit more trickier, this one, because she did put the hint there, start with the haunted house, because if you do start with the haunted house, you will be able to get the value of the haunted house right away, and then can start working through that. But if you want grade 5, you may give them, maybe you want to give them a couple of minutes where you don't give them the hint, and then give them the hint as well. Then give them the hint. There is more than one challenge here. It is, when you go to the site, you can subscribe, and that's how I subscribe. So I just get the emails for anything that does, and it's called Joe. I just emailed it's called Joe Bowler when I get it. And she will probably, then I would assume, have Christmas ones. So it's always kind of neat to have these with kids. Great little number talk that you can do with them. And there's a variety of them. So one of the things I was thinking today, I didn't do it today, but as I was going through this, I thought, well, you know what, perhaps I could change this into fractions, very simple fractions with students, because it's adding and subtracting, and they should be able to handle that with, of course, like denominators. So Okay, so today we're going to look at understanding of the outcomes 5 and 5, which is students interpret improper fractions. So we're going to look at improper fractions. We're not going to look at them. I'm going to explain and try and help you to understand the statements behind improper fractions and then therefore mixed numbers. I have a little and share with you a very interesting comment about the term improper fractions. And then we're going to look at adding and subtracting fractions with common denominators. And I am going to speak again to that because of the new curriculum. The languages can be very sometimes misleading. So when you see this adding and subtracting with common denominators may lead you to believe that you were at this grade 5, that the students are going to have to be able to change, unlike denominators into a common denominator. So we're going to talk about that because when I get to show you the progression to grade 6, and really what the grade 5 students are doing is the denominators they're adding with denominators that are the same. And 5, and unless I'm wrong, and I'm going to have to correct myself. If I'm wrong, I'm going to apologize right now when I explain this, and if correct this, and I'll have to send you more slides. 5 and 7, they're going to look at ratios to present relationships between quantities. And then we're going to look at that, what comes before. So students, we've already talked about fractions, we've talked about percentages in previous grades, and now we're looking at ratios. And then the most important thing at the beginning is we're going to look back at those prior outcomes from the new math curriculum, because with fractions, it's important to know that. So here again, I always give you the sites that you can have. There's a couple of changes. What used to be called EduGains from the Ontario Ministry, if you have gone to that, only for those of you who have used that, it's now got there's a different name for it. They have a different title now for their site, but it's still the same. You still have the same URL that will go there. So it's now what's called this TMERC. And then again, we have virtual, and there's your Thanksgiving puzzles right here. Okay. And the website, I guess, is called Mashup Math. I didn't realize that. And I get video. If you go there, you can subscribe and then you get emails. And that's how I found out about these Halloween puzzles. Sorry. So besides the site, I do want to share with you some professional learning resources. So these are to be purchased. There is a cost for them, but there's something that you only need maybe one in the school. Maybe if you're a math lead in your school or in your district, these are some interesting books, really well worthwhile, some great little activities. You see the third one is Number Talks. So these are things that you can pick up very, very quickly. The first and the last one, Uncomplicating Fractions by Marion Small, and this Rethinking Fractions by Dr. Bruce, Catherine Bruce, they're very good in depth for yourself to really understand the learning progression for fractions, and how you can work with students on them. So they're very much a professional learning and helping you to understand and have that intuitive feel for fractions and working with them. And then literature books. So even though it's grade 5, lots of books that you can use that deal with fractions, because fractions are, we think that they're very easy for students, for most students or all students, but thinking of a partial number or a partial quantity written as a fraction can be very difficult. And if you don't have that understanding of really what a fraction is and what it means, then to add and subtract fractions, especially when you get to mixed numbers, can be very difficult. And sometimes having a book and reading a book for them, some of these books here, they look like they might be primary, but they're not. They're very much made for upper elementary, and great to read for students, a great little context. This Phantom Toll Booth is one I've used. I show that with decimals, but there is a piece there that talks about percentage as well. So that's a chapter book, the Phantom Toll Booth here. Okay. And then we have this, the last resource, I think it's the last one I'm going to show you, is the glossary and the verb glossary. And I always bring this one up because it's really important. So I do I just before this session got the new website because there has been an update to the glossary. And so I'm going to have to change that URL or that site. This site that you see on this slide is not the correct one. So I'm going to make that change. And when you get your slides, you'll have the new link to this that will take you to the new document. So there, because of there's been some changes and an update. So again, that's really important. I have had teachers ask me a lot, what would this certain verb look like in the skills in procedures? What would that look like with that particular concept? And so this is really helpful for you. Okay, and then the last thing is, again, the whole purpose of me, or the whole reason I do this to help support you, is it is to give you ideas. And I as you go through the slides, you'll see, oh, I can do that with my students, I can do that with my students. But my primary goal, and I hope it gets accomplished to some degree, is to help you understand the math and you become comfortable with whatever concepts or whatever conceptual understanding is behind that math that you're going to have to deal with your students. And so that's why this quote that I really love is that we need to constantly deepen our understanding of the concepts our students are learning. And when it comes to fractions, again, we're going to look at a little bit past what we experienced when we were students, and myself, how I learned to, add, subtract, multiply. Grade sixes, those of you who might be in a combined grade, the grade sixes are going to be multiplying. And I know that we used to do these things like invert and multiply, or, we would add the denominator times the whole number and then add the numerator. So, and then there's nothing wrong with that. But that's all we knew to do. We didn't know why we were doing it or what difference it made if we did something different. But the idea is that hopefully you'll have a little bit of a better understanding of fractions. One of the things I've heard many, many times when I've listened to speakers or when I've watched webinars for my own personal professional development, many math educators say that one of the biggest indicators of success in math in higher grades is the understanding of fractions. So that's how critical it is. So again, you know this already, but it's just a lead up to the following slides. Remember that your grade 5 students will not have worked with the new grade 4 curriculum, and fractions have a very large presence in the new curriculum. So because they haven't worked with them, and because so much of the curriculum in the learning outcomes for fractions and ratios is new, the first step is to learn what the differences are. So we're going to just look at what your students are coming with and what your students should be coming with if they had been with the new curriculum. So on the left side this is what your students, the prior knowledge your students from grade 4 are coming with. So they do have an understanding of fractions, concrete, pictorial, and symbolic, less than or equal to 1. So they've only worked with anything that's less than 1. They can name a fraction like 1/5, 1/2, and they know that the fractions were as part of a whole or part of a set. But notice I did put in here in the box that the number line is mentioned in the achievement indicators, because in the new curriculum, number lines are so important. And in previous grades, students are going to have to be able to recognize and indicate where on a number line a certain fraction is, be it, and even in grade 5, if it's an improper fraction. But your students that you have now may not have come from that. Even though it's in the achievement indicators, they may have only worked with part of a whole and part of a set. They could compare and order fractions. And to me, that's where the number line would come in. And they can and explain what a fraction is, illustrate. If you say, can you show me 1/4? They could do that. Or if you had a circle, which we always used circles all the time, that seemed to be the big one, pizzas, cookies, they would be able to tell you what part is shaded quite confidently and provide examples of where fractions are used. So that's about what your students are coming from. But if you look at the yellow side, you will see in the new grade 4 curriculum, And that's the prior knowledge from what you are going to do with your grade 5 students. It's very, very different. So in the new grade 4 curriculum, and these will be your students coming next year to you in September of 2024, that they will have had some understanding, not all, but of these particular learning outcomes. So in grade 4 now, they are going to be learning equivalent fractions. So they are going to be able to model equivalent fractions by partitioning a whole into multiple ways. And that's where the paper folding comes in. So we have 1/2, and you're going to fold that 1/2 into 4. So each half then is divided into 2 pieces, and they see that there now is 2/4 or 2/4. We talk about, when you get your slides for grade 4, you'll see that. I have that. I'm using that as an activity to help you understand what the grade 4 teachers, and for you to understand what equivalent fractions are. So that's a whole new thing that your students do not have. And you're going to have to do some work on equivalent fractions. And they're going to have to determine fractions equivalent to a given fraction. And they work up to 12ths. So it's, they would have to know that 3/6 is or 1/2, and 3/6 is another fraction that's equivalent to it. But it's all going to be through visuals, through paper folding, through using bars, and we're going to work with sets to making equal sets. So making 3 sets, and 3 and 3, and then 6 and 6, if that's what you needed to do, out of 12. So we've got 3 out of 6 is the same as 6 out of 12 as a fraction, but it looks very different. Relating equivalent fractions on a number line. And grade 4s also are looking at factors and multiples, because they're going to learn this year how to simplify a fraction. So you can see that that's come down to grade 4. So grade 4s are working, what is a factor, what is a common factor, and what is the greatest common factor. They also have to know what multiples are. They have to be able to identify fractions in which the numerator and denominator have a common factor. So lots of working with factors. And in the new curriculum, it's not just multiplication, it's working through factors through division. So having 2 factors, 3 times 2 is 6, but also doing it through division. So if I divide 6 by 3, 6 is the divisor, that's a factor, and 2 is a quotient, that's a factor. So the grade 4s are learning how to do factors both ways. And then they have to be able to simplify and express a fraction in simplest form. So you can imagine, like, this is brand new, and these grade 4s are coming from just a little bit of understanding of fractions. But next year it'll be much easier for you, but you are going to have to do some prior learning. So fractions can take a little bit longer than you anticipated. And then we look at the grade 4s that you have now are coming with it. This is one that is very similar. They're coming with an understanding of decimals to tenths and hundreds. And in the new curriculum, they're still doing the same thing, but a little bit different. They're still working with tenths and hundreds. In the new curriculum, again, we're looking at position on the number line, but the grade 4 teachers, or if you were the grade 4 teacher, you very well may have worked on looking at tenths and hundreds on a number line. And then again, relating that decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. And then in the new curriculum, this year, different word, express fractions as decimal numbers and vice versa, limited to tenths and hundreds. So the decimals and fractions, the relationship, that is not, there's not much change in that. So your students will have a good understanding, hopefully, of decimals to tenths and hundreds. And then we have percentages. Because you are dealing with ratios, and the students in grade 4 are not coming with percentages, whereas in the new curriculum, they are going to come with an understanding of percentage. But when you work with ratios, we'll talk about it. And I have some slides for percentage. You'll relate the two together. So the idea that percentage is a part-whole relationship. So the numerator, and the whole, the bottom, only it's always out of 100. So this year, you're going to have to kind of work in that percentage as part of the ratio. So it is lots of differences. And this I gave to you because I just wanted you to see an overview of the total progression. This is not everything. But this is kind of the big chunks, the big understandings that you need to have, and good for you. It's good for you to have, especially when the red part is grade 5, but for you to have under your belt an understanding that, oh, you know, in order for me to do any work with fractions in grade 5, my students are going to have to be able to understand, or I'm going to have to look at equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions again. So this just shows you right from grade 1 to grade 6. So this is the new curriculum. Fractions are all the way back to grade 1. If I'm not mistaken, I believe fractions were formally introduced in grade 3 with the previous program of studies. But we know that students always came knowing half an apple, half a cookie. They knew that as that fraction half as something that they always shared. So, and that's where I put the vocabulary development starts here. And then we look at that unit fraction, which means that everything that's divided into equal pieces, there's always one. The unit fraction is almost like your place value system. That's your basic unit that you're going to start with. And then you'll work from there on either adding those unit fractions or saying how many of those unit fractions there are. One of the things I'm going to say to you, this is for the lower grades, I always do it, is to always remember that when you show them pictures of fractions, if I forget to say it later on, there are always 2 fractions. When you show that circle and you ask how many is shaded, the question is not so much how many are shaded as what are the 2 fractions. So 2/3 are shaded red and 1/3 is not shaded or is shaded white. So that's something that always think about that, and not just that one fraction that's shaded or one fraction that's not shaded, because immediately if you say what fraction is shaded, then, and they say 2/3, the next question I would ask is, what is the other fraction then? And they would be able to have to say 1/3. You could say 1/3 is what fraction is not shaded, but always 2 fractions, and that could be part of your math wall or anchor chart. So this is just, I'll just move on from this, but this is just to show you the progression so that you can see it very simply. And the reason that I questioned myself, and no matter how many times I've done this, I question myself, and I do need to speak to someone, but I'm going to say, as far as I know, grade 5s, you are adding and subtracting. It says with common denominators. And we always said like denominators in the previous program of studies. And then I saw common denominators and I thought, well, does that mean that the grade 5s do they get fractions, have to add fractions with denominators that are not the same and come up with a common denominator? That kind of threw me. But then when I look at grade 6, in grade 6, it says determine the common denominator of 2 fractions. So by saying that very statement, tells me that I'm pretty darn sure that we are only adding and subtracting with like denominators in grade 5. And that's where this new curriculum, with its vocabulary and its statements sometimes that can be a mouthful, can be a little bit misleading or confusing. And that's why I'm hoping that when you go through these slides, it will help you to kind of understand or get a better hold on what some of these statements mean. But you can go through this. So what we're going to do to help with the fractions, because they aren't so important, is we're going to look at the progression of learning for fractions, decimals, ratios, and percent. And not the learning progression is different than the curriculum progression. So this is progression of learning is the actual, when it's like when you take the outcome and you unpack it or tear it apart into its various attributes. So what comes in between? What's all the necessary smaller pieces for students to get to, say, let's grade 5? Or what comes in between grade 5 and grade 6, or grade 4 and grade 5, that's not mentioned in the curriculum. So we have a curriculum progression, and I know that Alberta Learning was very adamant. I was on the original committee for creating the scope and sequence for K-12 for the new curriculum, but I know that they wanted to reduce the number of learning outcomes. And sometimes when you reduce the number of learning outcomes, you miss what comes in between. And that's why the learning progressions have become so popular. So, and so important. I shouldn't say popular, so important. So it is a good idea to walk through the learning progressions to understand and internalize the order or the path of learning. Now, I'm not going to say to you that you would internalize every single step, but just to see the flow. Now, there are lots of learning progressions. I'm going to show you 3 or 4. Again, you can look at them depending on what you want to do or what makes sense to you. And what I tried to do is there are 3 new resources for the new curriculum, and I have 2 learning progressions that go with the resources. And it doesn't matter if you use MathUp or not. You can go to Marion Small's website and she has the learning progressions. So I'm just going to show you very quickly. Here's one learning progression, one format. She starts with her essential understandings. So it's looking at fractions, representing fractions, so fractions as part of a whole. And so you start with the one whole and then representing fractions. This she's showing us halves and fourths. So this is going from the whole to the fractional piece. So fractions of a whole, sometimes we call it area, or sometimes we call it fractions of a region. And then another way to represent is fractions as part of a set. This is the one that most students will struggle with, and the one that you have to kind of make sure that you understand, because it doesn't necessarily mean when we have parts of a set that we see here, all of these little circles are the same size, but it could be totally different. It could be pink and red, could be big and small, it could be many things. Those things, that clothing we wear for sports, and those clothing we might wear somewhere else to a party or something. I'm not sure, but just sets are very different. And then we're looking again, representing that unit fractions, and then fractions as numbers on a number line. So these are the 3 main areas. There is fractions distance, and then we can look at fractions capacity when we're looking at let's say liquids, for example. But this is the progression. So we're looking at fractions, the position on a number line, and then we're looking at fractions 1 or less, and then greater than 1, and then mixed numbers. So that's representing fractions. I'm just going to show you one of the examples for these statements, and this is where I'm talking about the 2 fractions and the different ways you can show them. So here's an example of a progression. There's always a progression from showing the fraction given the whole, which is the whole circle or the whole bar, to showing the whole given the fraction. So I'll just show you what that means. So here we have, this is showing the fraction given the whole. So showing the whole and asking for the fractions. So that's the whole circle. And we're asking for the purple one, we could say, which is 1/8, or the white ones, which is 7/8. So the student is given the whole. But one of the things they need to understand is to show the fraction and ask what the whole is. So this is something you think about, maybe you do with your students. If this is 1/3 of a whole, what would the whole look like? And I know that's hard to say. So this is 1/3 of a whole set, or a whole region. In this case, I shouldn't say a whole set, of a whole region. So if that's 1/3, what would the whole piece look like? And then they would do it that way. Now, we're trying to, when I do my sessions, trying to get them to do this in the previous grades, but that is part of what a learning progression is. That's something you see in the curriculum. Now, here's something a little bit different. You've got pattern blocks. If that green triangle was 1/3, what might the whole look like? Now, that's just one configuration. The student could do anything as long as they've got 3 triangles, that because each one is 1/3, which I should have labeled. And then and then you could ask, what would 5/3 look like? But that's getting into when we're getting into our improper fractions. And then again, this one, if this is 1/4 of a whole, what would 1 whole look like? And then again, I've got whoops, I don't have that for this one. And then they would put 4 of these side by side, either vertically or horizontally. But that's just a different perspective, but it helps to build understanding. And the quote from Marion Small says, a fraction is part of a whole. To know what the fraction means, we need to know what the whole is. And that's really important. And I put these 2 here. This is from Mathagon Polypad. And the reason I put them there is because that's where I created these shapes. So this is and you've got it you'll get it on your slides. are really good. You can do fractions with circles, or you can do fraction bars with polypads, or you can also do they also have the pattern blocks. So a nice little virtual site to use if you want to do anything with a smartboard. And then we are going on here with the learning progression. We're looking at comparing fractions with a common denominator or a like denominator, which is the same whole, to one where we have the like denominators, the same denominators, and the same numerator. So again, I won't go through this, but that's the looking at comparing fractions. And then we go on to looking with unlike denominators, and then addition and subtraction. And that's basically what part of what we're grade 5s are going to be able to do, is they're going to add and subtract with the same denominator. And I prefer to say same rather than common, but it's the same denominator. That's part of grade 5. But this part, adding and subtracting fractions, where one denominator is a multiple of the other, and then where we have creating common denominators, that's where we move into grade 6. So if students have a really good understanding in grade 5 of the process of adding and subtracting, what happens to the numerator, what happens to the denominator when you add, then they can move on. Here's another learning progression. I don't have this one to show you, but it's part of, if you do mathology, it's part of the learning progression. It's excellent. It's an excellent document. This is a document, kind of a book, I think. Some schools have it along with their, if you have mathology. But again, I'm going to say to you, it doesn't matter if you're using mathology or math app, you may be using jump math, you may be using your own materials, a collection, a blended approach. All of these learning progressions are good. This one I want to show you because it's got some really good activities. So this is coming from that teamwork, which is, whoops, I've got some questions in the chat that I'm not answering. I'm so sorry. What do they really understand? Is some good questions like these examples you are showing. Yes, yes. Yeah. Do they really understand is the thank you, Audrey. So that book by Marianne Small, Do They Really Understand Fractions, is really important. And I think I have it on one of the slides. If I don't, I'll make sure I add it. Thank you. So this particular one, this was adopted initially by the Ontario Ministry. This is where I initially got it. This is where they're using it in the Ontario schools. The only learning pathway I could find was for fractions. I couldn't find it for any other number. But what's great about this particular site is that if you click on any one of those boxes, it's the same thing. It's the learning progressions. We start with units, comparing, and then operating. If you click on any of these boxes, they're live. And if I click on, let's say, add and subtract with like denominators using models and symbols, when I click it on, I'll come to another page, and that page will have tasks, activities, explanations. So it's almost like I'm learning the learning progression. It's good for me, but then I get this added bonus of some activities that I can do with my students. And so that's what I've only found it for fractions. I hope it's other areas. I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to show you on the next one. So here's the ribbon task. So this is for adding and subtracting. So you actually get a task. It tells you what to do with the students. You have the instructional sequence, the curriculum connection. That's Ontario. So, but it could very well apply to anything that we're doing. And then it has highlights of student thinking and questions. Key questions that you can ask, and there's more than one example and more than one task. There's even sometimes some lessons that go with it, so that's very good. And then we have the last one, which is Graham Fletcher, and you're going to get this one as well. He's fun to watch because he does have books, but through YouTube videos, he has a series. They're about 7 minutes. And he draws really fast and explains. He's doing it on huge chart paper on a table. And he's very interesting to watch. And so it gives you that quick little overview of this one in particular is the meaning of for fractions, equivalence, and comparison. You have to be very careful with his, though, because it is American. And so he'll say 3rd grade, 2nd grade, but you'll note that you'll have to just be careful and note that, no, this is a different grade than from what we do. But all 4 of these are really important because it's really going to help you to teach when you come with the students. Something to think about when we introduce the symbols for fractions. This is just before I go on. Should we introduce 1/2, 1/3 when we talk about unit fractions, this is grade 2 and before, and that comes out of that video. He's asking, when do you introduce the symbol? So do you talk about it first and just say 1/2, 1/3? When does that, do you show it what it looks like? You do the cookies and the pizzas. When do you bring that symbol in? And the learning progressions will explain that to talk about that, and when they think it's best to introduce it. Your students will already have a sense of they'll already know about fractions. One of the interesting points is, though, when we do have the little ones that come in, as I mentioned, they know what 1/2 and 1/3 is. They know what they have to do. They know that it's 2 equal pieces. What we found, what the research has found, is that students coming into grade 1 have a good understanding, or a basic understanding, of the important fractions in their life. But as soon as it comes to, if it comes too quickly to the symbolic, or as soon as they come into school and learn about fractions using the symbol, they kind of lose it. They understand what 1/2 is in experientially, but when you introduce the symbol, it doesn't make sense to them, so that we have to be careful with that. And then we have some of the vocabulary. So do we call it same numerator, like numerator, common numerator? And that's the same with the denominator. That's the whole issue. So whether it's the same or like or common. You can see Marion use the word common denominator when she was talking about like denominators, whereas TMERC, which is the fraction pathways with the activities, they said like denominators. So we're looking at prior knowledge. I'm not going to go through this because of time. So I've got some slides for you right from the beginning, but just some, I mean, what is a fraction? I know is so simple, but just some of the things that you need to know, like what does it tell us? What is that numerator really? What is that denominator? What is that line in between? And you're going to find out as the older the students get, like when it comes to a ratio, that line says different things. And whatever you call that line adds meaning or gives meaning to that fraction. So if you say divide, if you say 2 to 1, or 1/2, 1/2, these slides here just start from there to say you need to think about these. So all of these I gave to the grade 4. What's a unit fraction? We've never used the unit fraction in our previous program of study, that term unit fraction, but it's really important, and it has a lot of meaning and is going to make things easier for students when they realize that that is like counting 1/5, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. I know that, again, that's difficult to say, but thinking about it that way makes a big difference, and it is really going to help you when the students have that understanding. I just added this little comment at the top that the ancient Egyptians only used unit fractions, which are fractions that have a numerator of 1. Only use unit fractions. So you can see that if they wouldn't be adding like 5 100ths and 6 100ths, it would always be 1/100th, 1 plus 2, 1/100th plus 1/100th, and so on. And they were used to calculate taxes. Whoops, I went a little further. Okay. And then some critical understandings, but again, it's this notion of the set. That's the part that is, if I'm going to say to focus on, because that's the part that's sometimes where students will struggle. So all of these have to do with fractions and prior learnings. So these are different kinds, other kinds of fractions, how we measure. I had mentioned it before: capacity, mass, and distance. Now, this is just a few reminders when thinking about fractions. Just again, fractions come in pairs, and I think I mentioned that. I thought maybe I hadn't put it, but always fraction come in pairs. So 2/5 and 3/5. Avoid. This is a reminder. This is to say apologize for some of my slides, but a reminder to avoid writing fractions with a slanted line. You're going to see some of my slides have slanted lines. It's just easy. It was easier for me to do. I was just a little bit maybe too lazy to go to my equation editor or my symbols and use the proper format for it. But really, you should, if you're going to do it on mini whiteboards or on the whiteboard, try to do it the numerator over the denominator versus the way I have it here, because it looks like two numbers side by side. And students might even say that was 314. Thinking that's just a slanted one. So something you have to, just little things like that to be careful about, because you never know who's not going to catch that. And then how we say the fractions. So 1/2 or 1/2. I tend to want to say the number all the time. It's a little bit more precise. It sounds a little weird sometimes. Do we say 3/4 or 3/4? for me, you say either one, but make sure if you say either one, or you say both of them, or you introduce both of them, that the students know that 3/4 is a good way to say it, because it attaches to the way we write it, but students are very familiar with 3/4, especially the notion of quarters in themselves. So just make sure that if you introduce both, maybe on an anchor chart, you say both, you show both words. So is this 2 1/2 or 2.5 or 2 1/2s? 2 1/2 is not, the reason I put 2 1/2 was because that was a student who was from another country and saw the 2 and the 1/2 and said 2 1/2. So that could be any student who might say that to you. That's just something you might want to watch for. And it's always good to write the words after the numerical representation, especially when you're just beginning. And maybe you just, because your students have that knowledge, they should have it. Remember, they don't have as much as they should have for the grade 5 new curriculum, but you might want to put that on an anchor chart. So let's start looking at improper fractions and mixed numbers. We're going to, there's the two most important parts that we need to focus on are the improper fractions and mixed numbers, and the addition and subtraction of fractions. The ratios and the percentage, they're not difficult to understand. I've got some slides for them, but let's focus on these. So the knowledge and the understanding that when we look at improper fractions, the students have worked with what we call fractions. I will say that it does not say proper fraction in our new curriculum. It just says fraction, but it does say improper fraction, and it says mixed numbers, and sometimes they're called mixed fractions. But in this one, in our new curriculum, it's mixed numbers. So it says a fraction can represent quantities greater than 1. Now, this is, I say this to the grade 6s, grade 6 teachers, that students will do integers, and so they will learn that life, I always say, that numbers exist to the left of 0. And that's the same here with improper fractions, where fractions we always just deal with less than 1. No, we don't go any further with 1. That's what the students know. But there is life, or there are fractions that are greater than 1, and they can be represented in 2 ways. So we have an improper fraction, has a numerator that's greater than denominator. All of these knowledge statements, these are things that you want to understand and know. These are the things that you can put on your math wall or your anchor chart. You can actually, in this case, in many of these statements, you share with the students. And natural numbers can be expressed as improper fractions with a denominator of 1. And that's important because that's your whole. A natural number, of course, is your counting numbers or your whole numbers. But that statement is saying, don't forget that if we have a denominator of 1, we have 6/1. What does that mean? That's an improper fraction, 6/1, but it does represent the number, or the fraction, if you do it visually. Visual is always so important, of the whole. So that is 6 wholes, 6 ones, or 6 whole numbers, 6 whole, WHOLE. And then a mixed number, and it's written in the form A, which is a whole number, and B over C, which is a fractional part. And it says here that B over C can represent an improper fraction. We don't use that. We do the whole B over C in itself can represent an improper fraction, but A and B over C together will represent the mixed number. Sorry, I confused you there. So 5/3 can be represented as 1 and 2/3. Now you will not get into let's say let's say it was 8/3, where you'll get into 8/3 as 1 and 5/3 again. You'll work with the students so that they'll put that mixed number into a complete improper fraction. Or sorry, the other way around, that improper fraction into the correct and complete mixed number. So, and then we go into our understandings. improper fractions and mixed numbers, I'm looking at the second one, represent the same number and are associated with the same point on the number line. And I wrote this myself in the box. It does not indicate to use an algorithm for expressing a mixed number as an improper fraction. And that's what I had mentioned to you earlier, that notion of multiplying. So 1 2/3, multiply the denominator by the whole number and then add the numerator. Nowhere does it mention in the new curriculum that you would use that process or that algorithm for working it out. It's more visual. You're looking at that one whole is 3/3. And so you've got 3/3 and 2 more thirds, which is 5/3. That's the way the new curriculum, that's the way that's the understanding that we want the students to have. So we don't have this word, it's express an improper fraction as a mixed number or a mixed number as an improper fraction. It's not convert, because we usually associate that word convert with some form of an algorithm. And then our skills and procedures to relate fractions and improper fractions to their positions on the number line. So we're looking at showing 5/3 on the number line and showing 1 1/2 on a number line, and then showing them both on the same number line so that the students understand when they compare which is bigger, 5/3 or greater, 5/3 or 1 1/2 or 2 1/2. Model fractions using improper and mixed numbers, using quantities, lengths, and areas. And one of the best way to model improper fractions or mixed numbers, is through measurement, is through recipes, capacity, looking at, because they see that all the time. So it's a good context for students. And then express improper fractions and mixed numbers symbolically, and then express an improper fraction is a mixed number and vice versa, and then compare those, and comparing mixed fractions and improper fractions on the same number line. And that's probably the best place. You can do it through using circles or area, but a number line seems to work really well. So basically, you need to have a good grasp of what an improper fraction is, what a mixed number is, and how they are related. And that's what the students will do. So here's your vocabulary. So what is an improper fraction? And I've used 2 sites here, but you have both of them. Doesn't matter which one you decide to use, or do your own. It's okay. So you can see that this improper fraction is dealing with mostly as a region. So you've got your circles and your bars. So looking at 5/3 and 8/5. And if I miss it later because of time, this is one of the biggest misconceptions students have. If you can see this 5/3 here, they don't see this when we look at mixed numbers. It's really hard for them to see this as this is one whole, this whole thing, and this is 2/3 of a whole. They will say, students will say, and I've worked with them, one whole, whoops. They'll say one whole, and I think I've got it on another slide, and 2/6. So they'll say that this is 1 2/6 because they see 6 parts. You can see where their thinking comes from, and you have to be very sure. Like a visual like this, I would always make sure I circled it, and you'll see that in the slides. So that's something where students can slip up or misunderstand. And then you've got what a mixed number is, and you can see it's always by region again. And I did put proper fraction in there as opposed to improper fraction. Even though our new curriculum doesn't say it, I just included it because it is to show that this is where the numerator is smaller than the denominator. But here's an interesting note. So the new curriculum, I said, does not include the term proper fraction. So it'll just say fraction, and then it'll say improper fraction and mixed numbers. What I'm seeing and reading more and more is that some math educators and researchers believe, and these are really well-known math educators, believe we should not call them improper fractions as it implies something wrong. So it's saying, some math educators will say, they're all called fractions, proper and improper. One just has the numerator smaller than the denominator, and the other one has a numerator that's greater than the denominator. So they would say an improper fraction is a fraction where the numerator is greater than the denominator. Now, we say improper fractions in our new curriculum, and so that's what you use. But when you think about it, what does improper mean? Because we don't say proper. And why is a fraction that has a smaller numerator proper anyway? So just for you to think about and know, but we will call them improper fractions. And they are, it says here, they are called fractions greater than 1, or fractions. Fractions greater than 1, or I've also read fractions where the numerator is greater than the denominator. Or just plain old fractions. So here's where I'm circling here. So here are improper fractions and mixed numbers. So there you see 1/2. This is very simple, but it gets the point across. We have 1/2, then we have 2 halves or 1 whole, then we have 3 halves, or 1 whole and 1/2, or 1 and 1/2. And then we have 4 halves or 2 wholes, and you can just keep going. Now you're going to see that you can actually do the same thing on a number line. So you can do 1/2, 2 halves or 1 whole, 3 halves or 1 and 1/2. So you can, the students will, and you will all already see on a number line that 3 halves is written as 3 halves, 3/2, or 1.5, but they are the same position on the number line. And that's one of the knowledge statements the students need to know. So there we're looking at mixed numbers and improper fractions. And then we've got these with the regions. With the squares, and you can see I've circled it. So 6/6 or 6/6 make 1 whole. There are 8/6 altogether. There is 1 whole and 2/6, or 1 and 2/6. So, but it's that important thing is the, sorry, that you see this as 1 whole, and now the focus becomes on the 2/6 here. So you're just looking at this this region here, and then the same thing here, rather than that misconception that we have 1 and here 3/12 in this case. And that's what you're going to get from some students, because they will see the 1 and then they'll see all the circles again. So something to be careful with. And this is the misconception here coming from Marion Small, where she gives that exact example, and that's where I got it from. So that students say that this is they're looking at this as 1/3 of a cake. So this is 1/3 of a whole here, and it's not 1/9. And I just took that idea for the mixed numbers as well, because that's what students will do. So we've got 2 wholes here, and this is 2 wholes as WHOLE, and this is 1/3 of them. So that's just a little teaching tip for you. Now, so this is, if this is 1/4, what would the whole look like? We did this before. I'll just show you again. So this is what 1 whole would look like in this case. How would knowing this help to express 6/4 as a mixed number? So if we know that 4/4 make a whole, and we started from that 1/4 or that 1/4, so 1/4, what would a whole look like? It would be 4/4, and then so now we have 1 whole and 2 more fourths. So that's 1 and 2/4. So that's just a little progression that you can see, that you may have to, for some students, they may not see that as they 6/4 as going backwards as this 1 whole, and I should have put them together. You can see I didn't. So don't use this example with your students, and then 2 there. And I've got here practice this using a variety of visuals, lots of visuals. So then I'm going to go into comparing. This is grade 4. I want to get into addition here. So you've got more slides that will show you that now you're working with the mixed numbers and the improper fractions. And there's quite a few slides here. We start with grade 4. This is the grade, your students haven't had this. So we're starting with fractions and looking at that stacked number line. Stacked number line is really important, and you're going to get some slides that will emphasize the notion that you always have to have the number line. It has to be, the ending unit has to be the same. So this ending unit has to be 1, this ending unit in the stacked number line cannot be 2, because that's going to confuse the students. So again, I have those, and then we move into improper fractions and start to look at them on the number line. You can see here's my ending. My ending unit has to be 2 here. So we're looking at comparing fractions, and it doesn't matter. This number line is divided into fourths because that's our denominator, and that's the understanding of denominator is how many pieces, how many parts, how many sections, and this one is fifths. It doesn't matter as long as our whole number, our unit, is the same. And stacked number lines are probably the easiest to use. They're like fraction strips in a way. So if you like to use fraction strips, you can use those as well. So, and then I've got some activities for you to try, and then you'll ask your students. So where would 3/4 go? And this is using the benchmarks. And where would 12/13 go? And then we work our way up to here, where we're looking at improper fractions, and we're looking at mixed numbers here. So, but there's slides in between. So this is to show you, try it. Remember here, where would 3/2 go? They should know this one because half is a benchmark fraction. But when we get into something like 7/8, the students in grade 4 and grade 3 will have learned that 7/8 is close to 1, and that's part of the new curriculum for them. And so you'll put them in the appropriate place. Using money, that helps. So this is all putting things in order. So let's move into the adding and subtracting fractions. And there are some other slides, and there will be notes that you'll get along the way. So I needed to try and do for what was important to grade 5, but you'll see, especially when you get the grade 4 slides, you'll see all of that prior knowledge. And you might want to look at those grade 4 slides first before you move into grade 5. So now we're looking at adding and subtracting. So we're looking at fractions with common denominators or like denominators that can be fractions with common denominators can be composed or decomposed to model the change in a quantity of unit fractions. And what that means is we can take 3/5 and we can decompose that into 1/5 plus 2/5 or 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. So you're going to see some slides. So it's just that decomposition and that composing, bringing it back together, which is the beginning of addition of fractions with like denominators. And so we're looking at addition and subtraction of common denominators with common denominators does not change the unit fraction from which they were composed. So if they were composed from fifths, the unit fraction is always 1/5. Where they were composed from thirds, the unit fraction will always be 1/3. And then fractions greater than 1 can be added or subtracted as mixed numbers or improper fractions. And because of the time I'm seeing we've only got 10 minutes, please watch for that when you go through this. It's always easier to start to add with improper fractions first, especially if you're going to go into some kind of a process or teach them a method of adding the numerators and then adding the numerators and keeping the denominator the same. Like you're going to have to talk to students about that, but get that, practice it yourself. How would I say 3/5 plus or 9/5 plus 4/5? How would I say that to add? And of course you want the visual first, and that's what that particular knowledge statement means. But sometimes it is better to go the way of the improper fraction. But I have a slide for mixed fractions as well, for adding the wholes and then adding the parts. And maybe that is easier. For me, it was always the improper fractions, but you may find adding whole numbers first and then the part fractions are easier than adding two improper fractions. So common denominators having the same denominator and relating each fraction to a common unit, which is whether it be fifths or thirds or whatever. And so what are the students going to do? They're going to investigate composing and decomposing of a quantity within one using unit fractions. You're going to see what that looks like. So we're going to decompose fractions and into additions, and we're going to compose them back again. Express as a sum or a difference. Okay, and I'll show you the slide. So you're going to express that adding and subtracting, which is bringing together or the composition or the decomposition. You could look at it as subtraction with as a sum or a difference. I'm going to show you decomposition a little bit differently so that you understand what that word means, and relate it to whole numbers. And then compare strategies for adding or subtracting improper fractions. And notice it says strategies. Visual is always important first, concrete, and then again, looking at how am I going to add improper fractions and how will I add mixed numbers. And you're going to add and subtract within 100 and then solve problems. So if I confused you, the bottom line is the students have to know how to add improper fractions and add mixed numbers with common denominators. That's really what the learning is here. So we'll look at this, and again, fractions are numbers, so we count, and the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to move that to addition. So we have one, just like a number line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when the students in primary grades or in lower grades add 1 plus 2, they're going to add 1, and they're going to go 2 and get the answer to, and in this case it would be 3 if this was whole numbers. So we're adding 1, 2, 3. But in fractions, it's the same thing. I'll go to 1/2, and I'm going to add another half to get 2 halves or 1, and another half to get 3 halves. And then looking at changing that into a mixed number. For now, I'm not. And adding another half, or if I add 3 halves plus 2 more halves, then I get 5 halves. And that's at 3 plus 2, which is our numerator at the top, and our denominator always stays the same. What we have, our unit fraction, the amount stays the same. And the same thing here. So 1/2, 2 halves, which is 1/2 plus 1/2. That's a visual. And then you can see as I go along. So I'm just kind of getting into and showing that now I'm doing addition. So I'm taking those halves and putting them together. That does show 3 halves, but looking at that, and that 3 halves going into the 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 is what is called decomposition. So in this case, I'm going to go the other way around, and this is the composition strategy that goes with your new curriculum, where it's showing you have one whole. That's what the investigate the composition of a quantity within 1 using unit fractions. So here's your one whole, and you're going to add 2/5, and then you're going to add another 1/5. So you can see that one's got different colors of circles in there. That's what the composition strategy is called, where you use the same whole and you just add the fractions of this, and of course it's going to have the same denominator. So you're going to express those compositions or decompositions with a common denominator as a sum or difference. So in this case it would be 2/5 plus 1/5 equals 3/5, always keeping the same whole. Another way you could do this is through the additive strategy. Remember, the outcome says different strategies. So this is the additive strategy where you do iterations. So I show 1/5, and then underneath it, I'm going to show 2/5 and then add them together. So students may identify 1/5 unit and then iterate it to create the 2 fractions. So now they're adding 1/5, which is what, and then they were adding 2/5. They would have done 2 more, and so they putting them together, they get 3. In some cases, what the illustration shows, or the image will show, that this with the 3 will go underneath. So we're adding the 1, and then we're adding the 2 underneath it, and then you put the 3 with a line so that the students will see, and you will see, you'll have the 1 plus the 2 more, which will make then 3. So it makes it a better when you move to the symbolic, but that's the additive strategy where you're adding the pieces together from parts of the whole rather than adding them within the whole. And again, it follows the investigate and express. So I just wanted to show you this because this is what the students came from primary grades when we looked at decomposing. So these are whole numbers. This is what the primary students do. 7 can be represented as all of these different ways. We're looking at whole numbers. So if we can somehow get our understanding of looking at the whole numbers and moving that into fractions. It's the same thing. So you can put 5, 6 at the bottom of the top of the mini whiteboard and do all the representations of it. So I can say it's 1/5 6 plus 5 6, 2 6 plus 3 6, and so on. So that's decomposing, and then when you bring them together, it's your composition through addition. I'm not looking at subtraction right now at all. I'm decomposing that 5 6 into parts and looking at bringing those parts together, which is the addition. So you can do, there's right now 6 ways of adding fractions where the students, all they've done it is based on 5 6. And you actually, when you're going to do this equation, you would put 1 6 plus 5 6 equals 6 6 if that's what you wanted to do. 2 6 plus 3 6 equals, oh sorry, 5 6. There's a mistake I made. That should have only been 4 there. So again, we're looking at these are the skills and procedures that this follows. So trying to relate it to whole numbers. And then again, this little reminder to not do the slants. So this is adding and subtracting again. And now I'm going to go into addition, subtraction, where I'm going to relate that to whole numbers. That's a good example to use. So this is what we do with whole numbers. So this is what we can do with fractions. This is just adding one or two more or less. So again, it's that looking at 5 6 is what I should have put at the top. 4 6 plus 1 6. 4 6 plus 2 6, sorry, it's starting from 4 6, not 5 6. So adding 1 6, adding 2 6, then taking away 1 6, then taking away 2 6. And again, making that connection between what we do with whole numbers and what we can then do with fractions. And now you've actually gone into addition and subtraction with like denominators. And this is just, I'm only showing you this to use the virtual manipulatives. So this is again the Mathagon or the Polypad where you can actually create those yourself or just project this onto the board for the students. So the only reason I'm showing you this is because then you can do lots of combinations because you can change the colors. So I can say that this is 5 6 blue, and the blue is blue represents one. So I've got each blue represents 1 6, sorry. So I've got 1 6 blue plus I've got 4 6 orange, or I could say 1 6 blue plus 1 6 gray. Like there's so many combinations. And that's the great thing about working with virtual manipulatives is that you can make all of those. And then you can do subtraction. I do have a subtraction slide for you, but I'm just going to show you the addition, and the subtraction is the reverse. And again, with the bars, you can do the same thing. So you have the whole there, and then you can start adding the different colors and doing different combinations. And if you're going to relate that to students, you can get the students to make different, if they can use different tiles, different cubolinks if you want, putting them together in different combinations, and where they can actually attach those cubolinks and say that you want to make, you want an addition sentence with 6, you want with 3 fractions. So they'd have to use 3 different colors. So there's lots of ways that you can use manipulatives and visuals with this. And again, here's just another way, 2 8s plus 3 8s. So we've got 2 of 8 pieces plus 3, and then you can go 3 white ones if you want to, and then the subtraction. The thing to remember about subtraction with parts of, or the region is with subtraction like natural numbers, we start with the whole quantity. So in this case, I start with 8 white pieces, and I'm going to take away 2, and so I color those red. You start with those, you don't add those on or do make a different chart. I'm not talking about comparison. You can subtract through comparison by showing 8 8s, and underneath it, like your Cuisenaire rods, if you want to use, or your counting rods, where you can show a fraction of 8 8s and then show a fraction of 2 8s and then make that comparison. But right now, I would say only do it through a set or a region. So then you want to just shade in those 2, and what have you got left? Now, if you noticed, I put those 2 red ones not together, and I'm going to suggest that you try that because we're so used to always putting the 2 same colors to get side by side. What you want to do is you want to just change that up, because that's still 2 8s, no matter where those red blocks are. And sometimes students will not see that. And then you've got your number line, adding them on a number line. This is just different. This is again to show you. This is a little bit busy. I was going to show you this in parts, but because of time, I decided that I would just put this all together. This is where we're getting into adding and subtracting, looking at adding in this slide, improper fractions and mixed numbers. So looking at this bottom one, I'll go right to that one. There's your whole. Notice that I've put the circle around it. So you've got your 1 and 3/6 plus your 1 and 1/6. And there's my, always, I'm going to bring in the symbolic. You need to bring that in. So I'm still using the visuals though. And so we're going to look at those, and we've got 2 holes here. And then we've got, if we're going to do the holes first, we're going to look at 2 holes plus, or 2, plus we've now got 4/6 there. And we're going to look at 4/6, or you can do it through adding the fractional parts, which is your improper fractions. So we have 9/6 and we have 7/6 here. And so then we count them all up and we've got an improper fraction. Now, you have to be careful because you have to know what do you want? Do you want the answer? Because it's easier, or is it easier or simpler to say we want it as a mixed number? Be very careful when you're working with the students that you specify, you know, if you give them an improper fraction, like here, the 7/8 and the 4/8, do you want it as 11/8, or do you want it as 3/8, or do you want it as both? It's all, you need to talk about that. And what's easier for students to do? For me, it's always improper. I don't know why. And then there's the subtraction. So we've got the 13/10 here, and we're going to take away, I've circled the 4/10. Or we also have 1 and 3/10. Take away the 4/10. And what have we got left? So I said to consider, make sure to have a good visual understanding of improper fractions and mixed numbers. It should be natural to say that 1 and 3/10 is 1 whole, or 10/10, and 3/10 more, or 3 more tenths. And that's 13/10. And that last statement, you just have to read to yourself. It should just be natural for you to be able to say all 3 of those, that's 1 and 3/10, 1 whole is 10/10, or that's 13/10. That's what that box is saying to you. Now my time is up here. So the next part was, this was another subtraction when we're looking at, this is an example of just removing it, actually removing the 1 whole rather than just circling it, and then having the 2/6 left over. And then there's some misconceptions or misunderstandings. I'm just going to show you this one here. Look at this one. Okay, this one that shows the adding and subtracting and some of the things. This is when we have a tendency to want to teach the algorithm or the process. And for some reason, in some cases, what students will do is they think they have to borrow when you have a mixed number taking away a fraction. So again, and then the last one is the ratios. And I think that it's not difficult because you're looking at fractions, decimals, and percentages. You have to go through some percentages. I'm going to send you the grade 4 slides. I've got some slides here looking at percentage, the meaning, all the different meanings of percentage. You're going to have to go through that. It's not as simple as, you know, yeah, students know percent, but no, you're going to have to talk to them about that and what a ratio is. And now that line becomes something different between the numerator and the denominator. And I've got here in this one, you'll get the whole one, is I've just taken this very simple example of apples and I've made them from ratios to show the different kinds of ratios you can have. So you have the green to the red, you have the red to the green. So it's this part whole. So green apples to the whole apples, red apples to whole apples, green apples to red apples to whole green apples, all of those different kinds of ratios. And then when we get into part to whole, which is what our percentage is, we're looking at percentages. Now, the reason I can do this is because in grade 4, they learned equivalent fractions. And so that's, again, you're going to have to remember to think about that. So that's what the ratio is. And again, some looking at fractions, this is putting it all together. Looking at this as a fraction, looking at these 4 dots out of 10, out of 100, as a decimal, and as a percentage, and as a ratio as well. So that's just a very simple example for you. That was a lot. I'm 3 minutes over. That was a lot to tell you. The people who are here, I actually, maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure I have all your names, because I will look to see, Annette, I will look to see, and Audrey and Maria, I know, and Rhonda, if you have been on the previous, if you are in a 4 or 5 combined, you may have the 4 fractions, but I'm going to make sure you get the 4 fractions, the grade 4 slides for the fractions, because that's going to help you to do some prior learnings. There's a second session on fractions and ratios on October 25th, where it's going to look more at looking at the different kinds of manipulatives you could use for fractions, some work with pattern blocks. You'll see some pattern block usage in the grade 4 slides, and then a little bit with ratios. So that was just a bit of a whirlwind. Grade 4 slides for sure. So all of you, Maria, you're becoming just like, I think I've almost come to every session. I'm just so happy that you come, and you're from my school district, which is really great. So I'm happy that you all come, but you will get those slides. And if you have a 5-6 combined, do any of you have a 5-6 combined? Or if you're interested, when I send you thank you, Maria. When I send you the grade 4 and 5 slides, if you want the grade 6 slides, I'm doing grade 6 on Thursday. Okay, Maria. So Maria, if you have a 5-6 combined, if you come on Thursday, that's great. If you can, okay, you'll be there. Otherwise, I was going to say I'll send them to you anyway. So thank you all very much. And Audrey, thank you as well. So thank you all very much. Now it's going to, you won't get your slides till after I do my grade 6 session, because I write notes on them. It'll take me a little bit of time. And then as well with the recording, you'll get those, that they'll follow right after. They'll send it to you. I send you my slides personally. So have a great day and a great rest of the week. And I'll see a couple of you on Thursday, maybe. And yeah, the next one after this is algebra. So we'll be working on algebra. So thank you for coming. Oh, I should stop sharing. So thank you all very much. Have a great evening and a great dinner or a supper or whatever. Lots to think about, Audrey, that's for sure. And I am so quick. Do far too many slides. So be nice someday to meet you all face to face. Thank you. I'll stop the recording now.